Now let's continue our coverage of the North Korea-U.S. summit in Hanoi. In the coming hours then, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump will meet again, and we'll learn what the two sides have agreed to in the Hanoi Declaration. I'm delighted to say I'm joined in the studio for some in-depth analysis by Park Won-gon, a professor of international studies, languages and literature at Handong Global University, and our defense ministry correspondent, Park Jiwon. Both of you, thank you ever so much for coming to see us today. I'll start with you, Professor. What do you make of the optics from last night's, what they're calling social dinner? The chemistry appeared rather good, but businesslike at the same time.
Yes, exactly, because I haven't heard about this word, so-called social dinner. And Sarah Sanders mentioned that dinner is going to be a social or a private dinner. But you correctly mentioned that it's more like the business dinner, because one of the participants from the North Korean side, this foreign affairs, the minister Lee Hong-ho, and he's a very real expert on this issue. But on the other hand, his counterpart is the acting Chief of Staff, Big Mulvaney, and I think he's more interested in this Kwon testimony in the House of Representatives rather than this North Korean nuclear issue. He hasn't have any idea about this whole issue. So, but it is important that when they first meet, I mean the Chairman Kim Jong-un and President Trump, the overall environment and their interaction is not that bad compared to especially the first summit. So overall, the mood is a little bit. We can make some kind of expectation that finally we will see some kind of meaningful agreement between these two countries. But we will see, as President Trump mentioned.
Right. Well, we're just watching the video as you speak, Professor, and we saw President Trump touching Kim Jong-un on the elbow. He didn't flinch uncomfortably or anything. Jiwon, I was wondering about what you thought. You were watching the images come in from Hanoi last night. Both appeared relaxed and friendly. What did you think?
Yeah, that's what I thought too. I mean, actually, this is the second time that they met in nearly 8 months. But between the times, they exchanged letters. The letters were very cordial and respectful. So I guess we can expect some fruitful result out of this negotiations this time.
Well, that's the hope indeed. And I'll stay with you, Jiwon, because you are our defense ministry correspondent, so you cover a lot of this news for us. North Korea has previously agreed to dismantle 2 of its main nuclear and missile test sites. And now it appears as though the speculation is that the regime may actually go ahead and shut down its nuclear facilities, at least the ones we know about, the main one anyway. What does it mean for North Korea if it actually does agree to shut its main nuclear complex where it enriches uranium and produces nuclear bombs?
Right, the Yongbyon nuclear facilities is what experts expect that they would agree to dismantle this time. Some have some pessimistic views that this is just one of many nuclear facilities in the north, but what nuclear experts say is this is the heart of North Korea's nuclear capabilities. It is located about 80 kilometers north from North Korea's capital, Pyongyang, and Yongbyon nuclear site is slightly larger than the size of Yeouido, Seoul's financial district, which is about 9 million square meters, and there are about 400 buildings are gathered there. And it has 5 megawatt nuclear reactor, light water nuclear reactor, reprocessing facility, which can make a significant amount of plutonium, which is nuclear fissile material, and uranium enrichment facilities. All of these are the key ingredient to make a nuclear bomb. And this facility started back in mid-1960s with the help of the Soviet Union at the time. And we can say the fact that this place makes the nuclear fissile material is what makes this place so significant. If we can put some freeze to this facility, experts expect that it will be a huge restraint to North Korea's nuclear capability?
Well, basically, I
yeah.
agree with that.
Yeah.
Yongbyon nuclear facilities is very important. As the North Korea, they just mentioned that this Yongbyon is their heart of the nuclear development. Yes, they have a whole history in the Yongbyon nuclear facility. And last year, the September 19th, the Pyongyang Declaration, and I think you remember that. It includes that Kim Jong-un, Chairman Kim Jong-un mentioned that he has an intention to dismantle of this Yongbyon facility, but with the corresponding measure by United States. So we are always talking about this Yongbyon facility. If North Korea just to follow the denuclearization protocol, which means that they have to freeze first and then reporting and verification, finally dismantlement, I think it's really meaningful. And also, as Jiwon mentioned, that they have two processing of a nuclear fissile, the facilities in Yongbyon. One is plutonium. Plutonium is more like traditional way, and the other is highly enriched uranium. I think this HEU is far more important than plutonium facilities. And also, it is allegedly known that there are at least two other the HEU facilities in the North Korea. So that's why we are talking about the beyond the Yongbyon, as the Steve Biegun, the special representative to the North Korea of the United States, he mentioned that beyond the Yongbyon is very important.
Professor, you touched upon verification there. That's like the key word for the summit, because what's the point of just promising to dismantle Yongbyon unless there are inspectors from the US or from the international community going into North Korea to check what's going on there. Do you think North Korea, before we get to our next questions, will agree to a robust verification regime, not only of Yongbyon complex, but like you say, these other sites that are suspected of also processing this radioactive material? I
think verification is the most essential, like possible agreement between, if we achieve this verification, because as far as I remember, that North Korea has the report their facilities at least 2 times, back in year 1992 and year 2008. But we cannot go further because North Korea refused to have the verification. Reporting itself is not meaningless if we don't have the verification. So this time, the Secretary of Pompeo and Steve Biegun and all the American officials kept emphasizing on this verification. But I'm not sure, because there are still very clear difference between North Korea and United States in how we define the verification. From this North Korean perspective, verification means just a visit. They even don't want to use the word verification, rather they want to use visit or observance. Yeah. And that's what they wanted to pursue. And on the other hand, as I told you, United States and the international community really have a verification, which means that the North Korea shouldn't destroy the Samar facility by themselves. They have to keep them intact, and then we have to go there and check the whole facilities and then freeze and then finally dismantlement. And that's the most important thing. In terms of verification.
Yeah, we saw several months ago a group of international journalists went to Punggye-ri and witnessed some explosions going off, but they aren't nuclear experts. They can't say for sure what's happening there. They could have just been entrances that could be rebuilt within a matter of weeks or
that's why
months.
So
why we need to see verified information that shows that these sites have been decommissioned and dismantled. One more thing, Professor, before I turn back to our Park Jiwon. President Trump appeared before the summit to be dampening expectations for it, going from saying he wanted to push for the full denuclearization to saying that he's just happy that North Korea is no longer testing nuclear bombs or testing ICBMs. But last night he came out and said that his second handshake with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and his conversation was quite exciting, and he was very optimistic. What do you think sparked this sudden change in tone?
We are not sure at this moment, because this President Trump. He said his great strength is unpredictability.
Right.
Well, and he also put the emphasis on the good relationship with Chairman Kim Jong-un. He even said that last year he even said he fell in love with Chairman Kim Jong-un. So I cannot trust what he mentioned. But the important thing is that you are right. President Trump keep mentioning that. The most important thing is that we haven't seen another round of the nuclear or the missile test by the North Korea. That's the important thing, because the United States got started this dialogue with North Korea because they feel threatened. They have the direct threat from the North Korea, and if they successfully build, I still think that they haven't finished complete their capability to have an ICBM. But ICBM itself is a very kind of a daunting threat to to United States. So that's why they started to talk. And so, in that sense, President Trump he put the most priority onto dismantlement or to get rid of ICBM. But I don't think the North Korea will allow to have any kind of the dismantlement ICBM this time.
Well, North Korea still has to get over the hurdle of the re-entry technology, which we hear is by far the most complex part of developing a workable nuclear missile. Turning back to you, Jiwon, it's not only about denuclearization. There's been a lot of talk about a possible announcement that the U.S. and North Korea during this summit in the Hanoi Declaration will make their own sign an agreement basically saying the Korean War is now over. The hot war finished in 1953, but technically both sides are still at war. The two Koreas are technically still at war. Surely this would be a remarkable achievement if it actually came to fruition.
Right. That's one of the main expectations, that they might agree that they will declare the end of the Korean War. But the thing is that this declaration of the end of Korean War is more of a political rather than the official one, because experts on this matter say the official end of the Korean War will be a peace treaty which replaces the current truce agreement, which is the armistice agreement between four signing parties signed back in 1953. So only when the peace treaty is signed, we can say the Korean War is officially ended, and this declaration will be a start of such talks. But the experts say this peace treaty is a completely separate legal document from the truce agreement, so it will have a lot of issues involved, from who will be the signing parties to like the content of the treaty, like the border issues between two Koreas. So it says it will take up to several years, the long and arduous process to make this peace treaty. So anyway, that process should start. So if the declaration comes, it will be a good sign that the true roadmap to build this perpetual peace regime on the Korean Peninsula will start.
Well, that would also open up many doors for North Korea if the US and North Korea do make such an agreement. The potential there for the lifting of sanctions, the potential for the US full backing of all these inter-Korean projects that are going on, potential new aid deliveries into the regime. What are your thoughts, Professor?
Well, before we are talking about that issue, I want to talk about the end of the War Declaration. I think about the War Declaration, we have to be very careful. I know this is a very contentious issue, as Jiwon mentioned that some experts, they have saying that there's no problem to declare the end of war because this is just a symbolic and the political gesture. There's nothing in there. But from other side, still there's some problem because first of all, think about the last year we have April 27 Panmunjom Declaration. It clearly mentioned that at least 3 or 4 countries gather together and to have a end of war declaration within this year, which means last year. But right now, the Blue House and the U.S. government allegedly mentioned that there will be some kind of end of war declaration between just the United States and North Korea. So actually South Korea is excluded of this whole process. That's the first problem. We have to keep this promise. And second one is that if we hear about the end of war declaration, there is a growing voice about the dissolvement of this United Nations Command, because United Nations Command itself established by the Korean War. So if we are saying that, oh, there is no more the Korean War, we finished this war, and there is no reason to exist the United Nations Command on the Korean Peninsula. And it will really hurt our security assurance. So I think we have to be very careful when we talk about this, the end of war declaration.
So, like you say, it's a highly complex issue, and if it does happen, it's going to take a lot of time, a lot of logistics to work through. One of the potential plus points for the North would be a drawdown, perhaps. Lots of people in the US are highly against it, but President Trump might be slightly open to it, considering he doesn't like the US spending too much money supporting other countries' militaries and whatnot. Do you think there could be any potential effect to the number of American troops stationed here in South Korea? There are roughly around 30,000 US troops stationed here on the peninsula.
Well, on that matter, the U.S. and South Korea has been very consistent and firm that they say just a few days ago, President Trump told reporters at the White House that this issue, the presence of U.S. troops in South Korea, is not the agenda of the talks, and it is not any way related to this current ongoing negotiations with North Korea. And South Korea's defense ministry has also said this is a matter between two allies, which is based on mutual defense treaty between South Korea and the U.S., and it's not a matter related to North Korea.
Yeah, basically I agree with Jiwon that this time North Korea and United States, there is no chance to talk about this withdrawal or partial reduction of the U.S. forces in Korea. But problem is that still there is a possibility that they are talking about the joint military exercise between ROK and the United States, and also strategic deployment of strategic assessment, because the North Korea, and especially Chairman Kim Jong-un's the January 1st address, he very clearly mentioned that permanently stop this joint drill and the deployment of strategic assets. But also we remember that President Trump, the first summit, during his press conference, he just unilaterally announced that the U.S. will stop this joint military drill without any concert with South Korea. Even I heard that Secretary Mattis of the United States, he didn't know that. So we are expecting this kind of things can happen this summit too, because we have a scheduled the press conference this afternoon too. So I'm really worried about this kind of activity by the President Trump.
Well, he is known to be a renegade, and like you say, Professor, that did catch an awful lot of people by surprise when he agreed to the cessation of those joint military drills that have been a feature of South Korea-U.S. alliance for a great many years. Thank you ever so much for your insights. We will be talking to you throughout the day as we wait for this summit. We are expecting the first activity of the day in Hanoi to start within the next couple of hours. It's still pretty early there, about 7:30 a.m. in the morning. So let's take a look at some graphics that we have drawn up right now, because we do want to give you a clearer view, a more digestible view of what to expect. In Korea, it's being called two different options. Big deal. So perhaps we could translate that as a wonderful deal for us here in South Korea and the US, namely a complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization of North Korea. Perhaps not too realistic there, but also lifting sanctions on North Korea. Pyongyang would be very keen for that. Of course, signing some form of peace declaration, a possibility, of course, and normalizing North Korea-U.S. relations, perhaps initially through the exchange of joint liaison offices. That has been brought up a number of times. Let's switch over to the small deal. If your expectations aren't that high, we may see some of these instead. North Korea may agree to dismantle its ICBMs. In return, there for an increase in aid to North Korea. It remains to be seen whether the two sides have ironed that out in their working level talks. There's also scrapping the Yongbyon nuclear facility, something we touched upon earlier. That would need to be verified, of course. We need to see if the regime agrees to that. And then partially, in return, the concession from the United States might be to partially lift North Korea sanctions, which truly crush the North Korean economy. So, yeah, you can get a feel of what the different options are there, but we never know until the Hanoi summit comes.